So, being honest with all of you, the dude lawyer in this episode, who's the other lawyer in the superhero law division, I cannot for the life of me find or remember his character name, and I just remember him as one of the hot dudes from the CW Arrow show. So I'm just gonna call him Hot Arrow Dude for this review. I apologize to him. I seriously cannot find the character's name anywhere. Anywho, with that important bit of information out of the way, and really puts me up as a highly professional reviewer here, I am here to review the third episode of She-Hulk Attorney at Law. So, if I'm looking at this episode as a whole, I have to say I am much more mixed on it than I am the first two episodes of the show so far. But, kind of weird converse way, this episode actually has me more interested and excited for the series going forward. And I think that it's kind of just because of what this episode represents, even though I don't particularly like at least half of this episode as much as I wish I did. That's because this is the first episode of the series so far that really feels like it's going to give me an indicator of what this show is going to be for the rest of its run. Episode 1 kind of felt like the She-Hulk origin story. Episode 2 was sort of setting up the status quo for the series going forward. And this one just felt like, okay, this is what we're kind of expecting to get. Like, She-Hulk is defending one character. We get to see some sort of MCU shenanigans and her dealing with the low-level stuff that she has to deal with as just a person trying to exist in this crazy superhero world, while also being a She-Hulk on the side. And then we'll also get other B stories going on in the background that are just kind of fun, also little side stories as well. And honestly, if that is what this show is, I'm really here for it. Because, as much as I've enjoyed the different MCU shows to varying degrees, they still kind of had this, I don't necessarily want to say problem, but kind of mandate that they still feel like they have the weight of an MCU movie proper, and feel like they're supposed to have that same sense of significance as the movies, maybe not to the same scale, but still have this oh, this is a big thing happening within the MCU, Moon Knight's dealing with big Egyptian gods, and Loki's dealing with multiple timelines in the multiverse, and WandaVision's dealing with this big PTSD thing leading into Doctor Strange, and sort of all that stuff. And I really feel like this show is the first one, and this episode specifically is the first one, that really feels like, the Wong and Emil Blonsky of it aside, just a fun little romp in the MCU. And that's kind of what not that I want every single MCU show to be this. Loki, I love so much, and I've liked a lot of what it was doing. Same thing with WandaVision. But I kind of just want more time to just exist and have fun in a kind of low-key way in the MCU. And this looks to be very much giving me that. And so if that's what this series is, just having these little moments and just kind of broad fun within the MCU and getting to see sort of these lower level things, I'm very excited for that. Honestly, this show kind of seems like it's, and this is going to be a terrible comparison for many of you, but it kind of works in my brain. It feels like it's delivering on the promise of that bad ABC sitcom Powerless from several years ago. I don't know if anyone remembers that, but it was a show that was originally pitched as insurance adjusters in the DC Comics universe. And they kind of shifted it to be they worked at Wayne Enterprises or whatever. It was kind of a really bad rip-off DC Comics version of Better Off Ted, which is a really great comedy show that was also canceled ahead of its time. I know I'm getting tangenting, but I promise you, that show I always found to be a fascinating idea, and the show was so lame because it didn't actually do anything with the DC stuff that it had, and just became a low-rent workplace comedy. This show, She-Hulk, feels like it's actually delivering on that because they can actually play with all the toys in the MCU box. And we got, like we said, Wong, we got Emil Blonsky, and all those things. And I like She-Hulk also breaking the fourth wall at one point, saying, look, I know you're excited for those people. This isn't a cameo show. You just prepare yourself. And I like her doing that first. We're not going to get cameos week to week. But, honestly, that stuff, to try and get into the review of the episode proper, was the stuff that actually kind of worked the least for me, because there, in Tatiana Maslany's She-Hulk's storyline this episode, where she's defending Emil Blonsky, I found the comedy kind of okay-ish. Her defending Emil Blonsky, those bits where she's trying to stall for time for Wong, and then him having this cult thing going on in the background. It was funny, but not ha-ha funny. It was oh, I'm amused, but I'm not laughing a lot at it. It didn't knock my socks off at any particular moment. There were a couple lines here and there that I really enjoyed, So all the stuff with Wong, like being like, oh, I can erase people's minds again. That would be crazy. I'm not going to do that. Or the bit where it was honestly a lot of Wong lines where he's like, oh, just Wong, Sorcerer Supreme. And then he like goes through all his titles. That was great. And then the other bit where one of them says like, you just admitted to bringing this guy, breaking him out of prison. That's a crime. He's like, oh, time to go. Those all got laughs for me. But then, like, other things, like, again, where, like, Emil Blonsky turns into Abomination and everyone's freaking out about it. I could take it or leave it. It didn't really, like, hit the bar that I wanted it to in terms of, like, A-level comedy. So I was kind of a little bit more mixed on that. But what gave me much more confidence in my enjoying of this series going forward was actually the B story. Because while the Beast story relied on the Dennis guy, who's just a character that I find, and I've called him out in the past reviews, to be a kind of a caricaturely, kind of like cartoonish, like, oh, look, this guy's certainly an asshole-ish dude who treats women badly sort of character. So he is a bit of a cartoonish figure in that sense that I find a little bit, like, annoying, to be kind of frank. That being said, he is used effectively here, because all the stuff with the shape-shifting elf and all of those like jokes and gags that we got with her, like coming in and pretending to be him or pretending to be the lawyer and like hot arrow dude and saying like, yeah, I love harassing women. That's my favorite thing to do. He's like, oh, come on, that's not cool. It's like, you know me. All those bits I thought actually were much better. And so it makes me kind of happy that like the story that was the least important, had like the least cameos within it, actually was the one that kind of engaged me a little bit more. Because again, it was that sort of like low ground, like very not dealing with all the huge MCU stuff, like look at this, like the ground level look at the MCU, like yeah, people would date light elves and they would like cause havoc and it would be kind of a problem, and like judges are just sort of like having to deal with that in this world, and it's become a little bit more mundane than we've seen in elsewhere in the MCU, where like everything's world ending all the time. So I just like the kind of mundanity of it, and I honestly thought that all of that sort of stuff worked for me. Couple other things just to mention here and there. I will say the fourth wall breaks did work for me here. There's a couple good ones where she's like, oh, connecting the A and B story. Nice. That's cool. I liked that bits. I also did like some of the more like commentary on how a woman is treated in this episode. I've kind of been up or down on it in past episodes. Like I've liked some of the more nuanced sort of discussions that this show has had on about like women in the workplace, women in these situations, women be overanalyzed and things like that. And then also like with characters like Dennis, I found it to be a little bit like, I'm not really enjoying that. This episode, I think, used Dennis effectively, not only, but also had a much better sort of use of those things, because even though they were a bit cartoonish, you got these like moments where you get to see her being, as She-Hulk, being analyzed online, on social media, in the news, people creating rumors off her, like whole cloth, like that one point where the guy says, hey, did the Avengers deny you? And then someone said, the next report is like, there's a rumor that the Avengers denied her. And like, clearly she just picked that up just now, and that rumor starts to get spread. All of that felt very real. Like, I know I am terminally online, so I'm a little bit biased in this respect, but just seeing that, I'm like, yeah, the more cartoonish, like, analyzing of women in these spaces and sort of, like, picking apart every public figure of a woman by, like, dudes online and sort of, like, a female lawyer, isn't that weird, and things like that. Like, all of that felt very real, and I thought that worked, and I liked her sort of taking that and sort of running with it at the end of the episode and being like, all right, I people are going to talk about me, might as well use it. Might as well get the attention that I want in order to be able to do the things that I really care about doing, like actually being a lawyer. I'm just going to like take it and use it to help fund the things that I want to do, rather than just sort of like trying to ignore it and downplay it. And I like that sort of battle with her. And I thought that actually worked well. So that actually I really enjoyed. And then I am curious to see what the overarching story is going to be, because clearly they have this sort of bit where she's attacked by the Asgardian construction worker crew, I guess we'll call them, which was also kind of fun, who are trying to pierce her skin and steal her Hulk powers or blood or things like that. So I'm curious to see where that's ultimately going to go. So yeah, on the whole, like I said, I'm mixed for the most part, just because the Emil Blonsky stuff didn't really work all that much for me. I didn't find the comedy all that funny, and I hope we get to see more of him, because I do like Eli Roth's character, and I enjoy seeing him back in the role. But ultimately, it just felt like, oh yeah, it was fine. rather than anything super special that they could have done for bringing this character back. Oh, though I did like, by the way, how they explained why he broke out of prison in Shang-Chi. So that I liked Wong sort of being like, yeah, I needed a worthy opponent, so I broke him out of prison. And also, I am curious to see how legitimate his like turn is, because again, it's one of those weird things where like it feels very fake, but clearly people were influenced by him, and so it kind of gets me in on the tone of the show, because the show feels very tonally weird from the rest of the MCU, so it is over heightened, and so it makes me distrust him a lot. But then I also could see, because the show is a bit more comedic, that this being played is somewhat sincere within the universe of the show. So I'm curious to see if ultimately we are supposed to trust him or not. I could see it either way, and I'm honestly kind of curious on that. So maybe we'll see him hopefully show up again, because I'd be curious to see what's going on with him. Other than that, that's my thoughts on this episode of She-Hulk. I like I said, mixed on it overall, but overall I'm also really encouraged with the direction of the series, if not necessarily this episode. So yeah, that's my thoughts on She-Hulk episode 3. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. I will be reviewing Star Trek Lower Decks review, should already be up for this week. I will also be reviewing The Rings of Power this week, the Lord of the Rings show, because I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, so I'm excited for that. But it probably will not come until Friday. So the episode's released tomorrow. I'm going to watch them tomorrow night with a friend and enjoy them. I just want to really enjoy any piece of Lord of the Rings content I get. And then hopefully I'll get a review up on Friday. Worst case Saturday, but me looking for it in the next few days. Beyond all that, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope you all live long and prosper. Mwah.